We're on Univega, Gentleman's Uprighty City Bike video part 2. Hi Scout. Hi Scout. What you doing? Just interrupting the video? Is it super fun? Is it super fun? Hi. Say hi. Oh, little brat. So we're going to do a intensive, if my dog will stop jumping on me, an intensive bottom bracket overhaul video / it's dead replacement video, but I don't think it will be. First thing I'm going to do is take this old chain off, because it's probably dead and we probably won't reuse it. And I did order a new one already. A nice old Z chain, my favorite for old 6-7 speed stuff. I'm still not used to this tool. I push this pin out like every time. Exact opposite of what I want to do. Bye-bye old wearable worn out chain. And we will start by pulling this crank nuts. This is old enough, instead of having crank bolts, it's got crank nuts. And it's super loose, like all nicely adjusted vintage bikes are, and not like how any modern new bikes are, which are all totally over tightened and destroyed. As you can see, it's just a little weird nut. And the actual spindle itself is threaded instead of having threads cut in. The other side still has its little dust cap. Oh, let's get footage of this. So the other side has its old school weird slotted dust cap. There's a lot of tricks to these guys try to use screwdrivers and just strip them out and round them out. Really the best trick is to use a thin cone wrench, because they're so thin. You just hold the cone wrench sideways in the slot. So the round edge of the cone wrench kind of sticks in there. And then you can righty-tighty, lefty-loosey it. Spin in the crank instead of the wrench. Same effect, it's undoing the threads. Here is a close-up of this guy. Pretty common style. Later on they made Allen bolts. Some of them just had 2 little pins. You gotta use a little tiny pin spanner. Univega, collarless. I might try and find another one of these. I used to have a bunch. I bet some people have them sitting around their junk shops, because it's pretty cool. You can see the cone wrench just fits right in. Doesn't strip stuff. Since I already got the bike in the stand backwards to show you that, I'll just keep working on it backwards. Yeah, this one's nice and tight. Another thing on old bikes is you always over-tighten this non-drive one a little bit more than the drive side. You always check it after some real test riding. For some reason, once in a while, the non-drive side likes to loosen up and come off and be a problem. And it is not cool. Alright, so that's off. So the next part is the Park bottom bracket tool. They make lots of tools. This is my favorite version. It's 2 parts. Well, it's 3 parts really. It's a handle welded onto this threaded guy with a little nubbin and this actual extractor bit. They make this in different sizes. They make like a black handled one for like modern-y ISIS bottom brackets. So make sure you get the correct threading and pitch. Old French bikes have a couple different threads and pitches. Carefully making sure this starts, goes in real easy by hand. And we're going to tighten it up just a little teeny bit. If you don't have these in at least just a little tool tight, sometimes they can tear the threads out of the crank arm instead of pulling the crank arm off. Okay, so just a little bit tool tight. But not too tight, we still want to be able to get this thing off. Then you thread this handle in. Now, if you really know what you're doing, you don't have to thread this handle all the way out, but boy, I've seen people get in real trouble because they'll think this is tool tight, really this handle is just bottoming out on that spindle. And then you pull your threads out of your crank, so then you get new cranks. So righty-tighty this, and it should just gently suck this whole crank off the square taper spindle. You can see it's a square and it's a taper. It's smaller as it goes in, so they don't fit flush, they don't fit all the way on. You press them on, you press them just a little bit tight, you sort of have to get a feel for them. Usually, unless your He-Man are going nuts, just about as tight as you can with a little hand tool is enough. Square taper, you see the other side, it's got the threads the crank tool goes into. Focus on threads. It won't. You can see the taper. The tapers look very nice in these. You can see they're very clean. They don't look blown out. The cranks don't press. If you can see, there's a little clean line in there, about 5-6 millimeters deep. And that's where they didn't press all the way on. There's about 5 extra millimeters in there. They could have pressed on further, which would have blown them out and wrecked them. But every time you pull these off and put them back on, they press on a little bit farther. And so eventually, you will blow them out and wreck them. Let's do the other side. Threading this tool all the way, not mess myself up. I'm going to leave the bike in the stand the wrong way out. Usually always work with the drive side out. This time we're doing drive side in, which is away from me. Just so you can see stuff better, especially when I start doing the bottom bracket, all the adjustments over on this side. Or we'll flip it all around several times in the process. You can see everything. So tool tight. Oof, that one came right off like crazy easy. Scary easy. You see this one also has a square taper. The grease makes it look dirty, but it's clean and nice. Let's get it off like this. If this is way too tight, you over tightened it, you can take this tool handle out and just clamp just this bit in your vise and just use the whole crank arm to spin it off. That really helps. Having a bench vise mounted onto a bench, giving you some real extra leverage. Now, on the bottom bracket, it's got a little lock ring. It's a threaded cup that goes in, and a little lock ring you tighten down against it so the cup doesn't loosen. And we'll use the tool with a hook. Go righty tighty, lefty loosey. Thank you. Let's check this guy. It's another tool with 3 prongs. Sometimes they fit certain things way better. This time is not one of those times. So here's a trick. I'm going to delicately balance this thin tool and this thin ring. And I'm going to give it a little tiny love tap with a real giant heavy hammer. Rebalance. Second love tap. And it is nice and loose. Comes right off. Lock ring. Little threads on the inside, little knurling on the outside for your fingers. Now this cup has 2 little flats. They make a flat little tool with 2 little pokies that go in there. It's real flat and weak. I don't think I have one right now. I really never use them anyways. Instead, I'm going to try this adjustable pin spanner. We've got 2 little pins, and it's basically 4 bottom bracket cups just like this. But they have 2 little holes in them instead of these 2 little flats. Push on those flats and turn in this cup. And it turns. I'm not going to take it all the way out, part of the way. I'm going to flip this bike back around for your viewing entertainment. Now this cup's kind of the same. This has 2 wrench flats. So it uses the other side of the tool, which is like a 36 millimeter, I believe, with just the 2 wrench flats, and it fully encases. Now these threads are reversed. They're going to be righty-loosey instead of righty-tighty. So I'll pretend like we're tightening it, make it go righty-loosey. And that fits kind of craptastic. Let's try this other one. Nah, they're both pretty crappy. Okay. Come over here, try and find an angle I like. I cannot. And that's real tight. I'm going to try and gently balance this on here and hit it with a hammer as well. If it won't balance or won't stay in place, you don't like it, I'll show you another trick where you can put some headset spacers, like a giant washer, it's a big headset spacer, stack it out, put that nut back on, hold this thing hold the tool tight to this bottom bracket cup, and then you can really beat on it and turn it, and that really helps. But hopefully we don't have that problem. So we're going righty-loosey. Come on, baby. Oh, and that was enough to break it loose. No problem. Spin right out. This comes right out. It's got, you can see the bottom bracket has a little set of cage bearings, a little cup. Inside the cup, it's got a little coned race for the cage bearings to sit in. The spindle itself also has a little machined coned race for the bearings to sit in, so they spin nice and freely on here. It's got a special dust jacket shield. God, this grease looks fine. It's still wet. I really didn't have to do this. Oh well. It doesn't hurt. This is very important. Don't throw these away. People always do, and they regret it. Water will come down from the seat tube and wreck the bearings. This protects your bearings. Another trick with these is axle orientation. So the axle is different lengths on different sides. So you can see, push this in all tight, the drive side's a little bit longer. It's got a little bit of a longer round part before it goes into the taper. The non-drive's a little shorter. And this is sometimes to stick the cranks out farther so you can have more chain rings or whatever. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes the other side is the longer one to even out your cranks and get your other crank out so both your pedals are centered on the frame or whatever. When doing fixed gear conversions on old bikes, this is a real fun practice. You take this out and you swap the axle. You flip it over so you put the shorter side over on the drive side to bring your chain line in for the single ring only. And then you put your single speed or fixed gear wheel set on, and boom, you got an instant single speed. It's kind of a lost art. That's really all we did in 2006 and 7 was single speed convert old bikes by flipping these axles over and sending them to the community cycling center to buy a cheap fixed gear wheel set. We called that fixed gear summer at the bike farm. That's all anybody really wanted. And we had hundreds of them, and then people would leave their old wheel sets and trailers in nice bits, which was wonderful for us guys who actually like fixing bikes. Of course, back then I only rode a fixed gear too. I only rode a fixed gear for years and years and years. I learned how to be a bike mechanic because fixed gears are cool. My knees will never forgive me. These threads look great. It's clean. There's no rust in here. This bike is in such nice shape. It's insane. Like, if this bike was 2 years old, I'd believe it. I'd be like, oh yeah, this is a brand new bike. It is so nice. I've just been lucking out so much getting gorgeous bikes. This is barely dusty. Kind of wipe off a little bit of the grime that's easy to get without this junk in the way. And I'm just using some mild degreaser. We're going to clean this guy up a little bit. Put this over here. I'm going to keep them side to side specific for reasons that make me happy, like whatever. Oh, this grease is so nice. I bet when they had the tune-up done last, they overhauled this bottom bracket. So you can look very closely on this race. You can see the shiny silver bit of race is where the balls contact and roll around. This looks like it doesn't have a mile on it. I wonder if they replaced the bottom bracket. This thing's like brand new. Boron, it says. So you can feel around your fingernail. You can take a ballpoint pen, rub the ball along there, and you can really feel for any imperfections or damage to these surfaces. But honestly, unless it's so bad it's noticeable, it doesn't matter unless you have like a crazy fancy track bike you're trying to set a world record with in like 1974. So it's not too bad. It's fine. You can always get a sealed cartridge replacement, like a modern one. There are some things you have to know about that. You have to measure the overall spindle length, but you also have to measure the jut, the amount the drive side sticks out of the cup. People forget that step and wonder why their chain line's wrong. So this might be a 122 bottom bracket, millimeters long. You go get a new 122 replacement, but the jut's 20 and the new replacement, the jut's 10, and you're like, what's going on? Most bike shops, most mechanics, if you ask them about what a jut is, they won't even know. So it's becoming a very lost art. Luckily, I really got into vintage bikes and sunk my teeth into them. Storing old Campy Novo record-equipped bikes, and got into horrible old French bikes with TA and Stronglight, Simplex components. Ew. So I had to learn a bunch of junk. A lot of bike shops, if you have anything French, they'll just be like, no, can't help you, it doesn't exist. And that's not true. Some of those parts are still around if you know what you're looking for. Some companies like Velo Orange still make French threaded bottom brackets. You can also tap French threaded bottom brackets out to English. Like a frame builder or a good bike shop that has taps, just cut right through. Just cut those threads very slightly larger. Anything that's destroyed in a nice vintage bike, you can tap out to Italian, because that's the 36 millimeters, is even bigger. And save an old bike with an Italian cartridge bottom bracket. Shimano does make them, and Campy makes them. Clean and nice. I'm not using the red rag for this, because red rag leaves lint. Tons of lint. And you have goobers of lint inside your nice, fresh, greasy bearings, and that'll get hard and cause problems and damage bearings and get stuck in things, and it's no good. I don't know if you can see, but little bits of aluminum from the cranks is coming off of these bolts. They tighten down on those cranks. You don't want any of that in your nice fresh grease. This blue paper towels are shop towels. You can get them at any auto supply store. They're like a lint-free, way more heavy-duty paper towel. Flip it over to keep any of that aluminum out of here. Give these little bearings a little squirt and rub. They're clean, the grease is real light, there's not a lot, it's real soft. Not really going to have to go crazy on these. Doesn't matter if some of the old grease is left in there. Sometimes I'll soak these and clean them and scrub them with a toothbrush. Run them under hot water, do whatever you got to do. Run them through a parts washer to get them real clean, but these are fine. As I'm turning it like this in my hand, it's turning the bearings, and fresh, dirty grease is coming up and off of them. Yeah, if this was a real fancy race bike from 30 years ago or 50 years ago, we would do this on a clean plate and change the rags constantly and soak these in kerosene and brush them and do all the stuff to get them perfectly flawless. Usually those bikes didn't have the cages on the bearings, you just free ball them. And you could do that on this too if these cages were dead or you mangled one in an accident. You could just put fresh 1/4 inch bearings in there and just use the grease sort of like as a paste. Grease them up real good and the bearings will just stick to the grease. And someday I'm sure we'll get something that has that. Maybe the headset on this bike, honestly. Too much fresh grease in there. Same to the other side. Pop in these dudes into their little homes. See how that grease pushed through? Just push it back up and into these bearings. I'm also going to put some on my finger, and I'm going to do the threads on the bike frame. I just greased these threads on the inside. I'm going to start with this preloaded cup on the non-drive side. Righty-tighty. Maybe. If it doesn't thread right in, I go backwards sometimes until the thread catches, and then you can thread it right in. And we're going to get that, halfway in or so, because we got to do all the adjustment from that side. This old cup, which I could clean out, but it doesn't really matter. It's not going to cause any problems. You can see on this axle, the writing, boron, and the numbers usually go as if they're being read from the rider. Reading incorrectly points towards the rear of the bike. And we already looked at it earlier. We know that the drive side had a longer spindle shaft. So we're putting it in the right way. If we were paying attention and noticed. Sometimes I don't, then have to guesstimate, then check it later. Now, the drive side cup is reverse thread, so lefty-tighty. And this cup is reverse thread because it'll come loose if it's not reverse thread, unless it's insanely tight, like on Italian bikes. So on this bike, we'll make that pretty tight. I'll flip the bike around, do the adjustment on the other side. So I'm holding the frame back here, grabbing it here. I'm going to push my way to freedom. The only 2 wrench flats means you don't really have a lot of leverage. Very awkward derailleur in the way, so I'm going to move the frame a little bit. And I might use the hammer just to give it one little love tap. It's a little bit awkward. I'm just using this flat wooden part here so it's not super loud. It's still hitting it real nice and hard. We're going to hit this way. And it moved quite a bit, and I think it's probably more than tight enough. Flip it around, got a nice kickstand totally in the way. Their trusty pin spanner or screwdriver, whatever you got. And we'll keep tightening this cup up until it basically stops. And there it is. This is still crazy loose, so we know we got a lot more to go. I take all the play out of this axle, it should be able to wiggle back and forth at all. Probably just one tight thread or something, just making it a little hard to turn by hand, but you still can get it with the tool. It's real common. Oh yeah, that's crazy tight. It barely even turns now. Don't go for a ride. Gonna put our lock ring back on. Just barely finger tight. Now here's the next trick. There's a big giant argument in the bike culture between greasing or not greasing these tapers. If you grease them, the cranks can push on easier or far enough or way too far. I basically wipe them mostly off, put them on pretty dry. Half the companies say one thing or the other, but I leave a little bit of grease on my fingers when I do it. There's a little teeny bit of grease, but then all wiped off, so it's barely a film if there's a film at all. And with good waterproof grease and enough of it, even though this old bottom bracket isn't sealed, it probably has 1,000,000 years in it. It'll last a long time if it's clean and re-greased. And if not, we'll just change it out someday. Press the crank back on. I should have cleaned the crank while I was over there. But that's not too big of a deal. It's a little bit of old grease. Whoever over-greased it when they pressed it on last time. And it's real clean. If it was any dirtier, I'd really, run some brushes or Q-tips through it. Roll a rag up and put it in there and spin it around. You can see me do that in the CB1 video. So you can't tell how tight the bottom bracket is just by turning. You really have to put this crank on, the drive side. We'll press it on and we'll be able to use it as leverage. We'll grab up here where the pedal is. Not on the pedal because it's got its own bearing plate and it will mess you up. Just the crank arm. We'll wiggle it side to side, not front to back, side to side to get all that play out. Got its little crank nut. Tightening it, tightening it, tightening it. Pretty tight. That's probably more than enough. Now, when we spin it by this, it doesn't feel too tight at all. Even though it felt crazy tight a minute ago. We'll wiggle the crank arm back and forth. Oh, nothing, nothing, nothing. Still buttery smooth. I feel no grinding in the bearing. Sometimes you touch a bearing or touch the steel next to a bearing when you turn it, you can feel the bearing vibrate, vibrate, vibrate as it's too tight. Oh man, that feels perfect. Now, to be 100% sure, the right thing to do would be to back this cup off just a little bit and find that play. And then just barely move it forward until the play is gone. We're going to do that since we're doing things correctly. So I'm just going to back this cup a little teeny bit. By back, I mean loosening it, lefty-loosey. Still no play. Still no play. See, you probably were too tight, but just imperceptibly too tight. I'm going all the way around checking play in different spots. Sometimes there'll be no play here and a little teeny bit there. And a real tight spot. Oh, here's a loose spot. So now I've got just the littlest, tiniest bit of movement. If I come up here, movement's imperceptible. I'd rather have it be slightly too tight than slightly too loose. So I'm gonna just tighten it a little bit. Oh yeah, a lot of play. Just tighten it a little bit. No more play. Now we think we're golden. And the trick is to hold this guy so the cup doesn't move because we've got the bearing adjustment set. But then just to use this little hook wrench to just try and tighten the lock ring. Not let the cup move. Just lock ring. But sometimes this will change the adjustment too. So all we do is double check over. Yep, now it's loose everywhere. So now I'm going to do a little trick. You can loosen this up, adjust the bearing, tighten the lock ring. This little trick, if these things aren't too tight into each other, we can grab just the lock ring. And instead of holding the cup, we'll move them both. Yep, see how just both of them moved? There's a little bit of play. So I'm going to try just both again. We'll eventually run out of just both. It'll be too tight and nothing will go. And then we have to loosen it all up and start over again. Yeah, weird. There's a little bit at this angle. None down there. None here. Maybe that plays in this cup. Let's try it again. See if we got any more. Just a little bit. Oh, that's so hard. Oh, it's like 99.99% out. Just a little bit more, baby. All right. Huh. I can hear it. Feels like it's definitely got a tight spot, even though there's a little bit loose left. We'll see if we can get any more. Now this lock ring's probably plenty tight by now. That's it. But I think we are just perfect. There's still a bunch of play. I would back this lock ring off, just tighten the cup, and then start all over again. So I'm spinning it. It's getting some of this excess grease out. We don't really want that kicking around. Same thing. Just going to make sure these tapers are clean. Nothing going on, no big dirt, debris. These squares are still perfectly square and all rounded and destroyed from being ridden on loose. Make sure these threads look nice. Make sure we're not going to put cranks on that can't come off again. I think we're golden. Now, an important step, which people forget all the time, is cranks got to be opposite each other for your pedaling. People are always trying to put them both on the same direction. That's no bueno. It's got to be 180 degrees from each other. Perfect. Everyone's first time they try and put them both on the same direction. Thread the nut on, tighten her down. Tight. I always on vintage square taper bottom brackets after the test ride, retighten this nut. Just to make sure. They always kind of come loose, and you'll always feel like you can tighten them more, but we really want this crank. For some reason, the non-drive likes to come loose. I've had it happen to me. I've destroyed very expensive cranksets I paid more money for than this whole bike. By not doing that, instead of having it wallow out and fall off. I've also snapped a bottom bracket. I've done a bunch of stuff. Yeah. Flipping it around again. So, since I only have this one dust cap on the drive side, because we're not going to mess with this drive side ever again. Most likely, in theory. Very delicate threads. Yeah, really make sure you wiggle around until it lines up and catches. And then just barely... It's better to lose one of these things than to strip it out and break it off in here. I've had to take little chisels and hammers and chip these things out of cranks before, which is not fun and takes forever. So just barely tighten the side of this cone wrench. And other than double checking that bolt later, that is An old style bottom bracket, sneak and grease or re-grease or overhaul. If you change the bearings out, you can call it an overhaul. Now we know the bottom bracket is great. So stay tuned. I think we'll make this a little short bottom bracket intensive, and I'll do this weird old headset next.